Welcome, and thank you all so much for being here. Today represents a culmination of a lot of great work, life's work in a lot of ways. So it's really wonderful that all of you are here to be able to hear about Lisa's book and talk a little bit about this issue. And as you know, of course, it's a controversial issue. People with very strong feelings on both ends. What I have appreciated so much about Lisa's contribution to this conversation is not that we don't have to argue about who's right or what we need to do, but as an established Jewish community, what we need to recognize is that Jewish families are making this decision. So what do we do from there? Do we welcome the people and include the people who are interested in connecting with the Jewish community and Jewish tradition and Jewish life, or do we leave them out of this story? And it is very much in our interest and in the interest of so many of the other Reform congregations throughout the country where we say, of course, we want to welcome people, we want to connect people. So how do we do this? How do we enable people to have a space where they feel welcomed and feel embraced by the Jewish community? And how can we continue to connect them to Jewish life? So I thank you so much for that, Lisa. And without further ado.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here on this gorgeous day. I don't know how anybody is voluntarily inside on a day like today, but thank you, Rabbi Mates-Bush, and I really appreciate your remarks and your support. I feel very supported here in my work. So before I start reading from the book, I was thinking I would talk a little bit about why I've been writing about this topic, of all things that one could write about, for nearly 30 years now, on and off. Both my parents were Jewish, but I grew up with very little in the way of Jewish community or observance. My family life was way too chaotic for that. Sometimes we had a Christmas tree, then we had a year of Jewish Sunday school, then Easter eggs, then a Passover Seder. But I was always drawn strongly to Judaism and Jewish affiliation. I think connecting with an affinity group larger than my immediate family would probably have helped me weather the tumult of my childhood, which was a difficult one. I married a Jewish man, Mark, my husband, and was very happy at the prospect of beginning a Jewish life together and having a family. During my first pregnancy, we talked about circumcision, something that had always made me uneasy. For Mark, it was a given, an essential sign of Jewish identity. Unlike me, he'd grown up with years of Jewish ritual and belonging, something I admired as well as wishing I'd had. So when we had a boy, I deferred to Mark. I wanted my son to be accepted in the Jewish community, and I wanted to be accepted in the Jewish community. But I couldn't shake the sense that I had let my baby down. I had failed to protect him. I found it hard to forgive myself for my acquiescence. Circumcision was apparently the price to pay for inclusion in Jewish life, but wasn't my bond with my baby more important than social acceptance? What did my actions say about my capacity to be an emotionally present, nurturing mother? In short, my son's circumcision was not a positive or self-confidence building experience for me as a new mother. At the birth of our second son, I was assured by the rabbi that though I had my doubts, I was participating in something meaningful, something that connects us as Jews. Again, I resigned myself to do what didn't feel personally right, because Judaism is larger than I am and is deeply important to me. This time, I insisted that local anesthesia be administered, something that was not standard at that time. But again, I was left feeling I had done something horrible. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt. Rituals are supposed to bring us together, not just with our family and community, but also within ourselves. Clearly, the circumcision tradition didn't do that for me. As I began to study and write and speak about this topic, I found other Jewish parents who felt as I did. But many of them had left Judaism over it. Well, I didn't want to leave Judaism. I wanted to be able to be myself within it. These days, especially in Reform Judaism, and Temple Sinai is in the vanguard of this, we make an effort to send a message of inclusion to those who might not look traditionally Jewish. We recognize the diversity of Jewish experience, identity, and observance. We don't just tolerate that diversity, we strive to embrace it. We openly welcome LGBTQI Jews, Jews with disabilities, multi-ethnic multi-ethnic Jews, and interfaith families. In short, we encourage people to bring their authentic selves to Judaism. Why? Because such authenticity revitalizes and strengthens our community. I think families not wishing to circumcise should also bring their authentic selves to Judaism. There shouldn't be an admission fee that involves turning away from one's own heart. There shouldn't be a price for inclusion. Non-circumcising families shouldn't have to fear lectures, judgment, condescension, or exclusion from mainstream Judaism. And within the Jewish community, they shouldn't have to feel closeted or less than. And so that's why, along with my co-author, Rebecca Wald, I wrote Celebrating Brit Shalom, the book we're here today to discuss. Really, to make a spot on the bookshelf for people like me. And also, some families don't realize they can opt out of circumcision and still hold a ceremony. So Rebecca and I wanted to give those families a way to transform skipping something into a positive spiritual act affirming connection with Jewish community and Jewish life. Until now, Jewish families that wanted a ceremony had to cobble together do-it-yourself services from various different sources. Rebecca and I felt these families shouldn't have to scramble for content while simultaneously bearing the weight of making a non-traditional decision. We also wanted to provide a resource to rabbis. Many rabbis today, especially in the Reform movement and other progressive movements of Judaism, recognize that families have diverse ceremonial needs. They consider it part of their job to bring young families into Jewish life. I've met with rabbis to talk about Brit Shalom ceremonies, and they invariably pull open a drawer of their filing cabinet and grab a manila folder of stapled together family-written ceremonies that they can then adapt for a new family. Pages are flying across the room and all that. Rebecca and I wanted to offer an appealing, bound volume with clear, inviting language, and also it was very important to us to have the book steer clear of polemics and just make it easier for rabbis to respond to the needs of these families. So I'm going to read now from the introductory message in the book. Today, a growing number of families are choosing Brit Shalom, a ceremony for Jewish newborn boys whose parents have decided not to circumcise them. Brit Shalom is a beautiful way to celebrate the birth of your son and to honor your heritage. It's a joyous event for all involved, including the baby. Many assume the term Brit, or more commonly bris, means circumcision, but it actually means covenant or agreement. Every bris ceremony recalls God's biblical promise to Abraham to stand with the Jewish people and protect them. During Brit Milah, a Moel circumcises the infant as a sign of the covenant. During Brit Shalom, the covenant is recognized without circumcision. In both, the baby is formally welcomed into the rich culture of Judaism and given his Hebrew name. A festive meal follows. Parents and progressive rabbis have been crafting their own Brit Shalom ceremonies for some time. Those are the ceremonies I was referring to in the filing cabinet. Until now, however, there has been no book about Brit Shalom. Within these pages, you'll find 3 complete services, each with its own theme. We've designed them to be family-led or rabbi-led, depending on your preference and circumstances. We've also included some practical advice about planning the bris. Yes, bris, in its original meaning, a covenant ceremony. Jewish communities have long had special ways of blessing newborn girls, and naming ceremonies for daughters are increasingly popular. While we've written Celebrating Brit Shalom with the parents of sons in mind, the first 2 ceremonies can easily be modified to welcome daughters. The third ceremony, Celebrating Equality, is written in gender-neutral language, so it needs no modification when used for a daughter. So that's from the introductory message to parents in the book. So when I talk with people about the book, they sometimes express surprise that there are families needing this kind of resource. And I was thinking it might be helpful to kind of, as a context, to explain that overall in the U.S., the rate of infant circumcision has dropped significantly from 81% in 1981 to a little over 50% now, and it's actually considerably lower in California, partly because we have non-circumcising populations here more than other places, but also because we're kind of in the vanguard of certain kinds of questioning certain sacred cows. So when I'm saying 81% in 1981, that's the, I forget the word now, that's the incidence, not the prevalence, right? So that's just for infants. That's infants that are born. 81% of male infants that were born in 1981 got circumcised, whereas now it's just a little over 50%. Sue, did you want to ask?
Yeah, are you talking 81% of the whole population in the U.S. or the Jewish population?
No, I'm sorry, in general. I'm just talking in general. Because we don't have the figures for the Jewish population. It's just not out there. The research hasn't really been done. Thank you for clarifying that. So how many non-circumcising families are there in the Jewish community? We don't know. The research hasn't been done. It's difficult to find out because Jewish parents tend to opt out of circumcision quietly, avoiding conversation with clergy. It's not just conversation, though, that's missing. Many of these parents assume that their decision means they're not welcome and preemptively decide against synagogue affiliation, Jewish summer camp, and so on. At a time when we're looking to attract young families, this seems very sad and wasteful to me. The unspoken party line on this has, I think, been something along the lines of, right, they should feel uncomfortable if they skip this foundational Jewish practice. It seems to me that this attitude is not only a bit self-righteous, but counterproductive to the building of a vibrant Jewish community that engages young families and focuses on vitality rather than judgment, personal spiritual authenticity rather than dogma. My research indicates that non-circumcising families are welcome in many synagogue communities and other Jewish institutions. I think we could be and should be doing more to let these families know they're welcome. That's another reason we wrote this book. So I'm going to read another page or two from one of the ceremonies. One of these has to do with the chair of Elijah, which is a decorative chair on which the child is traditionally held at a bris. If you'll notice, if anybody has had a chance to look at this miniature diorama of a Brit Shalom ceremony, you'll see that there's a little miniature chair here with a little miniature pillow, decorative pillow. That's the chair of Elijah. So that's a very special chair. In some traditions, the actual circumcision has taken place on that chair. In other traditions, the chair is left empty for the spirit of Elijah, and the other chair is used. But anyway, so this reading is from the third ceremony in our book, and we, in this third ceremony, we call it the chair of Elijah and Miriam. So I'm going to read you a little part of that. This is what the leader says. Today we acknowledge the great prophets Miriam and Elijah, who are here both recognized as protectors of children. And the leader motions to the chair of Elijah and Miriam. Here's the chair of the prophets Elijah and Miriam. Revered as the guardian angel of children, Elijah is said to be in attendance at every bris. Elijah is also remembered for standing up against enormous opposition, for being a bold voice against the false prophets of his time. Today we also recognize the prophet Miriam, best known for leading the women in song and dance following the successful crossing of the Sea of Reeds. Miriam also helped save the life of Moses when he was a baby. Miriam then showed remarkable bravery and resourcefulness by finding a way to reunite the infant with his mother. Now the parent says to the baby, "We think of Miriam the prophet as we imagine you experiencing the joys of self-expression, of singing, of dancing, of simply being. May Miriam also serve as a model of family loyalty, and may she inspire you to protect the vulnerable." And then the other parent says to the baby, or it could be the same parent, says to the baby, "We think of Elijah the prophet as we hope that you will be bold and stand up for what you think is right. May the spirit of Elijah protect you as you face life's challenges, and may you always be nourished by your Jewish heritage." Okay, and it's at this point in the ceremony, this particular ceremony, that the song Miriam and Elijah is sung, and you're going to hear that a little bit later, so that also kind of gives you an idea of what that theme is. Also in this book, we introduce a new ritual, which is the cutting of a pomegranate or other seasonal fruit or vegetable at the point in the ceremony where the circumcision would ordinarily take place. So that part, I will read a little bit of that too. This is also from the third ceremony. The leader says, The pomegranate has been a powerful Jewish symbol throughout our history, representing wisdom and abundance. Today, as we welcome this child into Jewish life, we will be cutting a pomegranate to symbolize the child's entry into the covenant. And there's Hebrew and Hebrew transliteration, which I don't think I'm going to attempt right now. Blessed is Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who has enabled us to choose the covenant of peace. So the parents cut the pomegranate and they say, Blessed is Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, by whose mitzvot we are made holy, who commands us to bring our children into the covenant. This child is hereby brought into a life of Jewish tradition, culture, and community. Okay, so I want to leave some time for questions, and as I said, we do have a musical component of this program coming up. But I just want to add at this point to make, actually Rabbi Meitzbush's remarks at the beginning also really were helpful in this. This book is really about inclusion of families who might otherwise feel disenfranchised or turn away from Judaism and Jewish affiliation because of their decision not to circumcise. So I actually can stop here and take a couple of questions if you want before we go to the music. Bonnie?
A question I have is a lot of times we were told that it's for health reasons also, and with those lowering in the statistics of people, of children who are being circumcised, is there any health statistics about disease or anything?
Right.
With it?
I don't know exactly how to answer that. I do know that we are the most circumcised, we have the most circumcised males in the developed world, and we have the highest rate of AIDS. So it's sort of, people should be using condoms, people should use antibiotics when they get a UTI. This is at least my thinking. But yeah, I don't know about any data there. I don't think there's any indication. Since other cultures, other non-circumcising cultures are doing fine, I think parents don't look at that and get more afraid. I think they tend to look at all the data and think, well, what does this mean to me, and what's the sensible decision here? And so I don't know any statistical answers to that. But Stephanie, what?
Well, Jessica's probably going to say something really similar. That there are statistics. I don't know what they are, but a certain amount of non-circumcised men get recurrent yeast infections from trapped moisture. Isn't that right, Jessica? I mean, I've seen adult men have to have circumcisions for repeated balanitis, yeast infections.
Right. Okay. So Stephanie, I don't know if you have, if you guys could hear, but Stephanie's saying, oh well, there is more of an incidence of a certain type of yeast infection and so on. And Jessica, well, you're both in the medical field. And I think, there may be, I think a lot of these things are preventable with less radical means. And so, Jessica, did you want to add something?
No, I was just going to say that the research and the statistics, I think, have gone in ways like all of our medical knowledge. So sometime probably in the 60s or 70s, it was felt, oh yes, it's much healthier. And that's why, I think in the 80s we had such a high rate of circumcision, because it wasn't just Jewish people. Everybody was getting circumcised because the doctors recommended it. And I think now there's a lot more controversy about whether there's any particular health benefits. And, that these kind of, if you don't circumcise, you could have some issues and, some hygiene you have to do that you wouldn't have if you were circumcised. But other than that, I think that, the studies go up and down in terms of whether there's really any health benefit or not.
Did you guys hear what our resident physician here was saying? Just that there's indications on both sides, and I think there's sort of a pattern of yes, it's a good idea, no, it's a bad idea, yes, it's a good idea, and parents kind of have to weather that and decide what they feel about it. So, what were you going to say, Claire?
Well, when you think about Judaism and its concern with health, when you think of the dietary laws, most of which started with a concern for health, not eating pork because people got sick. And we Reformed Jews have gone beyond that because we live in a modern world where we can raise pork that doesn't give us trichinosis, just for one example. I think that really the circumcision was a decision also of health. In those days, they didn't have showers you could turn on every time you wanted to get clean, and people probably didn't bathe very much. and men were much more likely to suffer some result of this, the kind of life they led. So that the pride that we have in our people being clean and healthy may have been very much part of it and became a ritual, just like today the Orthodox separate milk and meat when there's really no particular reason to do that for health reasons. So I really, that's my personal thought about this.
But Claire is saying that her sense is that some of these practices in Judaism, and probably in many cultures, start out as health, as this idea that this would be a health measure. Yeah. Eve, were you gonna? Sunshine. Yes.
I am not a Jewish person, but I'm a mother of an intact little boy.
Does everybody know what? Can everybody hear Sunshine? She's saying that she's the mother of an intact boy, and that means not circumcised.
Yes. So part of that means that I have been shunned from one part of my family because African American people are a very high cut demographic in this country, and being raised by a Dutch man, it's unheard of there really, unless you're Jewish. And so I feel very close to this idea of inclusion because, like Claire mentioned, I'm also people of color outreach for an intactivism organization here, actually across the country, and people of color, namely African Americans, are very misinformed about the reasons why we do that in our community. It's dirty, it's ugly, you get yeast infections with girls, we just give antibiotics. So, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on as far as needing circumcision later or having complications with intact genitals is due to a lack of intact care information. So a lot of parents are told to rip it back and clean it and scrub it, and really, you don't really need soap there. It can change the pH and create the same things that it could for females. So that's what I know. That's anecdotal evidence from my experience of why intact boys and do have issues. So that's not a statistic, but that is what I discovered. And my son has never had a single problem. And I was told not to retract. And I was given proper intact care by a very undercover, intact-friendly doctor, thankfully. And that is what led me to this space here and to the work that I do, because I was under tremendous pressure to circumcise my son. And I mean, they went so far as to say he'd be ugly, nobody would want him, he's going to catch diseases. Well, that's up to his future partners, and also babies don't have sex, so it doesn't really matter about the future part. So, it's just, yeah.
So are you saying the Black community want you to be circumcised?
Yes, my immediate family, the Black side of my family, I mean, it was a discussion at baby shower. I've been to Brit before. I was engaged to a Jewish man. It's part of the reason why we actually broke up was because he felt so guilty holding the child, and he just had no idea there was anything like this. Any other option, any other way, that was just part of pretty devastating for him. He's a gentle soul, and I know there's a lot of people who feel the same way and don't want to, and want to be included, and also want to follow their heart.
Yeah. Thank you, Sunshine. Anybody else have questions? Deborah?
Well, this brings up an awful lot of thoughts. It reaches a lot into a lot of issues, I think, for our community and widely. One is I've heard it which I would know nothing about, but it actually affects men's sexual experience as adults, and I think that's something to think about for parents. But to me also, this is part of the patriarchal tradition of our religion. This is an establishment of a practice that women could not do. So when the cleanliness is part of it, it also really made a big separation between our roles because women didn't, and so we created, I guess, the baby naming tradition. And so I was not brought up Jewish. Actually, my parents were rebellious Jews and did not circumcise my brother because they were atheists. And he has since felt like he couldn't be a Jew as an adult. Now, yeah, and I'm gonna tell him about this book. Which is, it's pretty sad. I mean, you know, and we were brought up atheists, so, but it pushed him away from something that he was in some ways attracted to. But my other thought is just, as this tradition has been developed for girls about baby naming, why we need a separate tradition for boys. And I don't know, I don't understand, I throw that out there, I don't know it. So I understand that the circumcision thing is very deep in our culture.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why, but it's kind of sad still in a way that there's a division. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting point and a legitimate point. I think, you know, we sort of looked, Rebecca and I, my co-author, we kind of looked at, you know, what do we want to accomplish with this? And there's a more immediate need for this, in our minds, there was a more immediate need for this resource for parents of boys than there was for naming ceremonies that could be for girls or because the problem with that whole thing is also, there's a lot of, for example, synagogues will say on their websites, oh, you know, you can have a naming ceremony for a baby boy, but generally it's not clear, it's not clear, we welcome boys that haven't been circumcised. It's sort of, I think the parent looking at these websites assumes, they think I'm going to get a hospital circumcision and I want to have the baby named at 30 days or whatever, you know, at a Friday night service in a month, whatever. So I think part of it is that. I think part of it is that, part of the need for this resource is really to make it clear. It's sort of, I don't know, I may be getting into trouble here and I'm really thinking off the top of my head, but it's sort of like Black Lives Matter. Yeah, you know what? Black lives matter. And yes, every life matters, but, you know, all lives matter and all that. But really, Black Lives Matter to me means, hey, there's been a huge inequity here. And let's acknowledge it and let's embrace it. And, you know, as opposed to just, oh yes, everybody should have a ceremony. So there's a little bit of an analogy there. I'm sort of thinking off the top of my head. But yeah, I think that's why. It's that Black Lives Matter, I think. Yeah. Stephanie?
I've heard of some people doing like a pinprick to get a drop of blood, and there's a connection with blood sacrifice.
Well, I don't know about the connection with blood sacrifice, but I forget what it's called. Hot dom, yeah. Where there's blood. Yeah, I mean, sometimes with conversions, some rabbis insist on that. I don't know. I don't know much about that, and it's sort of beyond the scope of, you know, what we're talking about. But yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I think just, in terms of that is, when an adult male converts to Judaism, if he is not circumcised, sometimes people do choose to go that route. If he is circumcised, then it is just a small drop of blood drawn to essentially as if they had a drink of blood as an infant. So,
And that fulfills the...
So, but it is, yeah, but that is something specific to, like, adult converts. So it's not something that people do.
Dominic, what were you?
Just a few questions from the audience ago, there was the issue of adult male sexual experience raised. And I feel like I can offer a viewpoint which may be uncommon in Abrahamic communities and especially in America, where the cutting of the foreskin is so prevalent. Well, I have one, and as an adult who has had some experience with my own body and using it, I can say having all of my penis intact is very important to me. And I've even gone so far as to have conversations with medical professionals in advance of a surgery saying, hey, you know, if I wake up and I'm missing my prepuce, there's going to be a problem here, because incidences of, while you were having a tonsillectomy, we also gave you a circumcision, which has happened, especially in certain neighborhoods. They call it the TNC special. But anyway, to the main point, I just feel like I can offer a perspective that many cannot. And to me, as I think about it, it's like thinking about color vision versus black and white. There may not be solid research in place to come out and show people what it is that you experience with all the skin and tissue intact. But I don't need the scientific community to tell me what I've seen firsthand. And frankly, the concept of losing it keeps me up at night sometimes, just because of how important it is to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think that speaks to something very interesting, which, and this is as far as I'm going to go into anything medical here, because it's not my bailiwick, but one thing that strikes me often about these studies, the pro-circumcision studies, is that there's no discussion of drawbacks. There's little discussion of risk to the surgery, very little, there's sort of this, for some reason they get a free pass just saying, yes, this is very low risk, and no discussion of drawbacks. So in other words, I'm thinking of risks as being surgical risks. Dominic's really talking about drawbacks. He's really saying, no, actually this is a valuable piece of my body that I want to keep. And so anyway, just that, I wanted to add that. Sue?
I have a comment for you and a question for you. My father never was circumcised because he was born in a little town in Czechoslovakia. They were the only Jewish family, and with the traveling oil, the risk of infection would have been far greater than it was worth it. And he was totally Jewish. It was never an issue. Sometimes I think that people think, and I don't frequent men's rooms, so I could be wrong, but it's hard for me to imagine that men go around checking out each other's penises to see if they're circumcised. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Not in my experience, no.
My question for you is, Israel being what it is, how would they feel if an intact Jewish boy came over? Would they consider him Jewish or
Right.
not?
Well, right. If you ask the ultra-Orthodox, yeah, I would say the answer to that is don't get me started. But my understanding is that there's a large proportion of Israeli society, Jewish Israeli society, that is secular. Some of those parents are also opting out. There's a fairly healthy intactivist movement in Israel among Jews. And that I think there was a study done about these people being in the army and whether it's sort of like, this idea of, is it okay to have gays in the military? That kind of thing. But they concluded that there just was no issue. And there was no issue about being shunned or, having difficulty. So that was really interesting. That was a study that came out a few years ago. I don't have it in front of me, and I don't really remember many specifics other than it was the Israeli army. So
if they want to marry, the rabbis don't go around looking?
I don't. Okay, now so that's a really interesting point, Sue. They don't go around looking. I have been told on a number of occasions, nobody checks. Why are you making when Rebecca and I took our book to the biennial. The Union for Reform Judaism biennial in Florida in November, the reaction to our booth where we displayed our book and the miniature diorama and so on, I got that from a few people, and I have gotten that from a few people. Look, nobody checks. Well, right, nobody checks, but the thing is...
But do they ask?
They don't ask. They don't ask, but the thing is that I think it's affecting affiliation. I'm fairly confident that this whole don't ask, don't tell idea is affecting affiliation. It's affecting how likely a family is to come and talk with a rabbi at all for fear of judgment and lectures and all that kind of stuff. So I think putting the burden back on the family, like nobody asks, don't sweat it, is kind of, I don't know, to me it's a little bit of a cop-out because the fact is these families are very worried about being judged. They may decide, okay, I don't want to do Jewish preschool because I'm skittish about diaper changes and I'm skittish about toilet supervision and I don't want anybody judging me. And what if the person doesn't know how to, doesn't know how to help my child, change the diaper properly or, without interfering with the anatomy. I don't know. People have all kinds of anxiety about that, especially in a Jewish setting, right? So I think that's the thing about saying, look, nobody checks first of all, some people do. We have family here at Temple Sinai who had to leave another congregation because that congregation did not welcome that family's boys to have bar mitzvah because they weren't circumcised. And we got a family like that a couple years ago. I mean, this does happen. And that was not an Orthodox synagogue, by the way. But yeah. So it does happen. And I think my point really is that we shouldn't be putting such a burden on the parents to be brave. We have outreach for a lot of other things, and I think we can have some very tasteful, well-stated signals on our websites, on the preschool pages, on the life cycles pages, and so on, that these families are welcome, because they're not getting the memo, is my sense. That, from talking to a lot of them, they don't realize they're welcome, or they're afraid. So I would love to just go ahead and do the music. I'm so excited about this. We have, so we wrote music to go along with the ceremonies in this book. And once Rebecca and I identified what we wanted to have the songs be about that would fit in within the ceremonies, then I asked Ruben to set them, my son Ruben Moss, to set them to music, and I can say this because I'm the mother, they're gorgeous, the songs. Gorgeous. What did you say?
Biased.
I'm biased, it's true. I do have my point of view. So anyway, I just want to say about the music that this is really an exciting piece of it for me, because traditionally there's actually no music that's uniquely associated with bris. So because it's a somber occasion, we don't say the Shehachianu, which is the prayer praising God for bringing us to this season. We don't say the Shehachianu. There isn't music generally. You might hear Eliyahu Hanavi or something like that, because that's for healing. But we thought, this would be a great opportunity to add some Jewish music to the canon and have it really bring the ceremonies to life. So that's what we did. So I want to, I would love to call the choir up. These dear people from the choir, from the Temple Sinai choir, are here to make this happen. So, and from Temple Sinai in general. To make this happen. Okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit about the music from the book, okay? Songs for Celebrating Brit Shalom is an album of music that has been created to accompany all three ceremonies, highlighting key moments in the service. The first song, Lech Lecha, is played as a processional as the ceremony begins, setting the tone for giving everyone a few moments to gather. Shalom Shalem comes next, featuring a sentiment that is shared by many Brit Shalom families, the connection between notions of peace and wholeness. Miriam and Elijah is played prior to the cutting of the pomegranate in recognition of these two important prophets' roles as protectors of children, and Rimanim Rimanim, with its upbeat cataloging of the pomegranate's significance in Jewish tradition, comes in toward the end of the service. So Lech Lecha, we're going to start with Lech Lecha. The lyrics of Lech Lecha are drawn from passages in Genesis in which God commands Abraham to depart from the land he has known and to venture forth into unknown territory, an action that will ultimately inaugurate the history of the Jewish people. The Hebrew words Lech Lecha are usually translated as, go forth from your birthplace. However, the literal translation is, go to yourself. What is to be made of this peculiar grammatical construction? Medieval French Rabbi Rashi interprets it to mean, go for your own benefit, indicating that the journey God is calling upon Abraham to make isn't just physical, but is for his spiritual benefit. This notion of going to or for one's self, of looking inward to discover one's outward path, is universal. So without further ado, Lech Lecha.
Go for
one is called Shalom Shalem. I'm going to read this little paragraph to you. The song Shalom Shalem highlights the linguistic connection among words of peace and healing. In Hebrew, the word shalom, God or peace, and the word shalem, wholeness, share the same root. In English, the word holy is related to the words whole, health, and heal. The lyrics of Shalom Shalem also reference an oft-quoted line from the book of Zechariah, not by might nor by power, but by God's Spirit. This captures the idea that we are called upon to bring our spiritual intent to our Jewish practice and to do so peacefully. This is Shalom Shalem. And now we have the song Miriam and Elijah. I'll read to you about this as the soloists for this are setting up. At a ritual circumcision, the prophet Elijah is an important figure as he is said to watch over the baby to ensure his survival and healing. The baby is circumcised on the ceremonial chair of Elijah, and Eliyahu Hanavi is often sung. Miriam and Elijah evokes Elijah as guardian of children and also as someone who spoke against false prophets and stood up to kings. The song also celebrates the prophet Miriam. Although widely known for leading the women in song and dance after the Israelites had escaped Egypt, Miriam is rarely acknowledged as a mother-child advocate whose ingenuity shapes the course of Jewish history. In a pivotal biblical story, Pharaoh has issued an edict that all Hebrew baby boys be killed, so Moses' mother sets him adrift in the Nile that he might have a chance of escaping certain death. His sister, Miriam, stations herself nearby. When Pharaoh's daughter spies the child and decides to keep him as her own, Miriam thinks quickly and volunteers to find a Hebrew nursemaid for the infant. Through this brave intervention, Miriam is able to reunite Moses with his mother, who then feeds and nurtures him, literally and as he grows up, with Israelite traditions and identity. So here is Miriam and Elijah.
Undaunted by danger, you see the chance to
one last song. It's called Rimonim, Rimonim, and you guys have little lyrics sheets there. I'm just going to read from this part of the book that talks about the pomegranate. Each ceremony in celebrating Brit Shalom explores a different theme and incorporates the rich traditions of Brit Milah while introducing a novel act, the cutting of a pomegranate. The pomegranate has long been a powerful Jewish symbol. It is said that when the Israelites reached the Promised Land, the scouts brought Moses pomegranates to demonstrate the land's fertility. Today, it's traditional to serve pomegranates on Rosh Hashanah because the fruit's many seeds represent abundance. Since the covenant reenacted during the Brit speaks directly to the ongoing fertility of the Jewish people and their land, there is perhaps no better symbol. The pomegranate is also associated with wisdom. Legend has it that its seeds number 613, corresponding to the 613 mitzvot, or Torah commandments. In the book of Exodus, the Hebrew high priest's robe is said to be embroidered with pomegranates. The pillars in front of King Solomon's temple are described in the book of Kings as being engraved with images of the fruit, and the inspiration for Solomon's crown may have been the pomegranate's top, or calyx. Why include cutting of any kind on this joyous occasion? This act reminds us that embracing one's Jewishness throughout life is a serious commitment. It also acknowledges the role that circumcision has played in Jewish history. Instead of simply skipping circumcision, in cutting the pomegranate, we recognize the past while moving toward a new and better future. Okay, so now Rimonim, Rimonim. Sing along if you like. Who wrote these beautiful songs and led us so beautifully today. And my husband Mark, Claire, Eve, Orit, Michelle, Norma, Andrea, and Jessica. Thank you very, very much. Well, we have let's see what time it is. It's like 2 o'clock, so if anybody has more questions, you could ask, or we could just break and, Mark?
Well, I was just wondering if you had any feedback from people who had practiced the ceremonies and suggestions, alternative differences that
Right.
maybe might have been suggested.
You mean in terms of, the next edition of this book? I need to correct the typo on page, yeah. We did get wonderful feedback from a rabbi in LA who used it for ceremony that she did, and she loved it. And we haven't heard from that many people, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what people's response is. But people can also read through these and just decide, I don't like this, I do like that, whatever. So.
I have a question, Mom.
Sure.
The book, or you indicated earlier that you wanted to avoid polemics in the book, but I didn't know what that meant.
Oh, you don't know what polemics
I don't
means?
know what polemics means.
A college education, folks.
So can you clarify?
An expensive one. Okay, so polemics is being preachy on one side or another. So I mean,
That's what I suspected.
Argumentative.
right, I mean, wait, argumentative. Well, yeah, argumentative. Yeah, is that I think of it as being kind of like tendentious or something, like having a point of view and really just being preachy about it. I don't know. Actually, Ruben, the truth is, I have.
So like dogmatic, not like.
Dogmatically preachy.
Preaching. Yeah, we wanted to avoid anything like that, and in the songs too. I mean, these are songs that can be used in other contexts besides this. They're not, really, but they're put into key. You can play them at key moments during the services, and it's marked in here, so families can just follow along, and they can use the MP3s to do that. So if they don't have a cantor or a singer. It comes with the sheet. Actually, we're kind of debating this right now. Right now they're sold separately, but we're sort of thinking about it. That maybe anyway, we're not sure yet.
Yes. A strong verbal or written attack on someone or something. The polemic against the cultural relativism of the 60s. Synonyms: diatribe, invective, rant.
Rant. That's good. See, I thought it was
attack, harangue, condemnation, criticism, admonition, rebuke.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Apparently my college education doesn't cover polemics either, but. Sunshine, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I just wanted to ask you about the rabbi in LA. Is that the one in Venice? And she's a celebrant.
She has. In fact, she gave us a really nice blurb, which is on that display there. Open Temple is the name of her place. Lori Schneider Shapiro.
Yes.
Rabbi Shapiro. Yeah. And so we've gotten wonderful feedback. And we have some wonderful blurbs. I mean, our website now has a bunch of testimonials about the book, and it's really exciting. So that's it. So unless anybody has questions, or we could just chit chat after too. I'll be around. And don't forget to check out the miniatures. Art?
I just wanted to make a comment, and it relates to just showing up fully, and also just feeling so much love for the people being here and willing to explore this issue. And I want to say that this is an issue I have explored, and I'm circumcised and really upset about it. And I want that, and because we're talking about polemics, but I want to show up as a person who's really upset about this. And I see the values of social justice and equality and having a sexual positive view of sex in a positive way. And when I looked at the research and the story of how this idea of health benefits has been promoted, I see tremendous amount of bias and confusion and denial, and not acknowledgement of the actual functions of this part of the body. And when you look at other countries that don't do this, you don't see that they are suffering from any kind of ailments because of it. In fact, they tend to be healthier. So yeah, I want to put it out there. When we talk about sexual autonomy, right? And you welcome someone into the world by cutting off the most sensitive part of their body. So So yeah, I wanted to share that I think this is horrible, and I feel like this book is a beautiful step in the right direction. It's very tactful and loving, and yet I do pray that there will be a day when people really are willing to explore this and say, is this really in alignment with our values? And what is the reality of how we got here? Because my understanding of how circumcision was adopted was this is a way that you mark slaves in ancient history. And it's a way of as saying to someone, your body doesn't belong to you. The ancient Egyptians circumcised their slaves. In the Middle East, in those times, there was a culture of mutilating genitals.
And also African American slaves here in the United States.
So to me, like being circumcised is a mark of slavery that I carry on my body, and it's a message that I don't have autonomy over my body, and so it's very troubling, and I want that to be seen.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for hearing that.
Yeah.
To
Sunshine?
add on to your testimony, as an active and out intactivist in the Bay Area, I split my time between here and Los Angeles, and I'm an actor. My agents are Jewish. My manager is, they're Jewish, and I am so grateful for this, for this option and this information and this discussion, because I do have Jewish friends who are only able to talk about their pain without intactivists like myself, because they can't talk about it with their parents, and they would be evicted from their home if they said, you hurt me, tell me you understand that. And it's devastating. And I also want to be able to be in LA and talk to people openly without being called an anti-Semite. I don't know how to talk about it like that without, I am so grateful for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. So we can eat already.